The 2024-25 Toronto Maple Leafs are operating under the same stereotypes and pressures as they have been for years now. Playoff chokers who can't get past the first round despite having a highly paid core group who, on paper, should have already found cup success by now. It's the same narrative year in, year out. The Leafs have a great regular season, they comfortably make playoffs, they get matched up against the same teams, usually Tampa or Boston in round 1, and they lose, usually in a game 7 and usually in the most painful way that you can imagine for their fans, with the exception of the 2023 playoffs where they got out the first round only to be put out again by the Florida Panthers. The Leafs have battled with this sort of Groundhog Day. Great regular season, bad postseason. Will it be the same again this year, or will it finally be different?
I should slow it down, take it easy. I just keep on staring at my phone. Yeah, my head's spinning hard.
Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. I'm Victoria. I talk everything Toronto Maple Leafs, hockey, NHL, from across the pond in Scotland. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my channel and also like this video if you do enjoy it. Maybe it's because I'm obviously a die-hard Leafs fan myself, but every year I am convinced that this is the year. This is the year the Leafs are finally going to do it. They're going to go on a cup run, maybe even win a cup. I think it every year, and every year, of course, I am wrong. And this season was no different. The Leafs did have a strong start to this year. They won the majority of their games to start off the season. And as we go into the final stretch of the regular season, the Leafs do have a decent record. They are 20-12-1 at home, and they are 19-11-2 away from home. It's not a President's Trophy winning record by any means, but it's still very good. And last night's matchup between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers was highly anticipated. It felt like a glimpse into a playoff game during the regular season. The two best teams in the Atlantic, the two who have been battling for top spot in the division. A matchup which could theoretically take place in the first round, but is far more likely to take place in the second round if both teams were to make it past the first. Which then means it would be 2023 all over again. Even if the Leafs reach round 2, you know, it's very likely that it could be Florida that they faced once again, same as last time, same team that put them out last time, and they were massively outplayed whole series long. So last night's game got me thinking about a lot of the problems that the Leafs face in the postseason primarily. It's the same ones that they faced in previous years, and everything indicates that they are likely to face the same problems once again this postseason. Last night's game was very reminiscent of a playoff game. The Leafs came out absolutely firing. The Leafs played really well overall, I would say, but they were still outplayed by the Panthers team, and although they came close to tying it up, the 3-2 loss doesn't bode well for the playoffs. The game also had a lot of red flags for this Leafs team, which makes me think that they're going to run into some of the same issues that they have in previous years. There's 5 things that came to my mind based off of last night's game, but also based off of past playoff problems the Leafs have faced. I mean, there's definitely more than 5, but these were the ones that sprung to my mind anyway while I was watching the game. So for today's video, I thought we could discuss 5 of the top problems that the Leafs are likely to face based off of last night's game against Florida, and how they can solve these problems and potentially go on a cup run this year, which would be nice. Also, yes, I know it's still only March and I'm talking about playoffs, but according to many Leafs fans and also according to many Leafs haters, the postseason is really what counts, huh? The first problem that the Leafs come up against, and it's one that's an external factor and is largely out with their own control, is that the Atlantic division is good. It's really good, in fact. This season felt like the most viable in a while for the Leafs to take the division title. Boston are undeniably a weaker team than they have been in years. It seemed like Tampa were also not on the same fantastic form that their previously cup-winning team has been. And it honestly felt like it was going to just be between Florida and Toronto, to be honest. It felt like one of those two teams was going to take the title, and yes, those two have obviously been the ones that it's been flicking between in top spot, but the division is a lot closer still than I anticipated it to be this year. Now, I'm not saying at all that the Atlantic Division is the hardest in the NHL this year. That would be a ridiculous comment to make, given that the top 3 teams currently in the NHL are in the Central and Metropolitan divisions. They're not in the Atlantic. Obviously, the natural cycle of the way that hockey works, where teams are really good for a while and then, you know, they go into rebuild mode and then they build up again. That natural cycle just means that there will always be some divisions which seem slightly easier than others. The Leafs make things difficult for themselves no matter what, so I mean, I don't know how much this factor really does play into it, but the truth is, the Leafs are always likely to face a good team. Tampa obviously have won multiple cups recently. Boston were President's Trophy winners recently and they were really good. And then of course Florida most recently are the reigning champions. So it's hard to deny that the Atlantic Division is a competitive one, and it is one that has produced many cup winners and cup contenders in recent years. Whoever the Leafs face this year, the same as in previous years, they're likely going to be a good team. Of course, it's getting less and less likely it'll be Florida. That's most likely a second round issue. But Tampa have crept their way back up the standings and they are breathing down Toronto's neck right now. They're only 2 points behind them. In addition to this, the Ottawa Senators absolutely terrify me. Ottawa have a lot of talent and the Senators have been getting better as the years go on, which is natural. They have got a very young team which is progressing every year, and I do not want the Leafs to face them because the Senators have the Leafs number. The Leafs don't play particularly well against Ottawa, and Ottawa know how to beat the Leafs, and I would hate to face them in round 1. Ottawa are sneakily really good. They have a lot of talent, and I've always felt in recent years that their record and their standings don't reflect how good the team actually is and how much potential is there. And so now that there is the potential where the Leafs could play Ottawa in the first round, I don't want that. I'm not saying I want Tampa, but maybe better the devil you know, I guess. They have at least beat Tampa before in the first round. Ultimately though, I don't think it really matters who the Leafs get in round 1. It's up to them. It's going to be their own failings that let them down. It will be them that lose it for themselves most likely, and so even though it is a factor that they are likely to get, a really, really good team in the first round, ultimately it is up to them to perform well enough. We've seen this season that the Leafs can lose to the San Jose Sharks. I'm not too sure how much it really matters ultimately, but it definitely plays into previous playoff losses that the Leafs do always end up matched up against a really good team, and usually a team which does go on to go further, with the exception of Boston last year, obviously. But it's still a factor nonetheless, and last night's game against Florida just really highlighted to me just how much talent exists within the Atlantic Division and just how tough the first round is going to be for the Leafs no matter which way it goes. Next is the issue of score more. Get more pucks on net. Maybe it's the fact that Austin Matthews hasn't looked like himself all season. In fact, he's been nowhere near the standard that he has been in previous years, and that's definitely taking a hit on the team. But the Leafs can't expect to win big games when they only score a couple of goals. Low scoring leads to marginal wins at best or losses like last night. The Leafs weren't outshot last night against Florida by any means. In fact, both teams had 25 shots on net, but they need to create more dangerous chances, especially from a player like Matthews. And I don't know if there's some injury thing still lingering there. I do hope that's the case, because otherwise the Leafs have massively overpaid for a player whose sole role on the team is to score and he isn't doing it. Ultimately, he's paid the big bucks to shoot and to score, and he hasn't been shooting the puck nearly as much lately. Just because your goaltending is great doesn't mean that you can rely on it while not having too much offensive output at the other end. I just sometimes want to see them take more shots. Those kind of annoying shouts that you hear at hockey games where you hear fans shouting, "Shoot!" Yeah, that's sometimes how I feel internally watching this Leafs team. Please, get pucks on net. Please, score some more goals. You have so much offensive talent, you should be scoring more than that. Another problem that the Leafs consistently run into is that they have a core four that sometimes doesn't feel like four. Last night's first line of Nyes, Matthews and Marner had absolutely no luck finding the back of the net, which is ultimately what their job is. And in a game like that, I want to see the first line performing far better than they did last night. John Tavares and William Nylander were far better last night, in my opinion. JT scored a stunning goal in the opening minutes of the game with a fantastic feed from William Nylander. And this seems to be a very common trend for this team, where some of the core will show up and it seems like the rest doesn't. And I know I talk about it constantly, but if the Leafs don't re-sign John Tavares, I'm going to be so mad. Like, so mad. The value he still has at his age, not re-signing him, on a big discount of course, would be absolute madness. He also loves this team so much. You can tell the passion that he has, and that's the kind of player that I want on the team. But anyway, not to go on a John Tavares tangent, but there's definitely an issue that the core group have a tendency to not all show up at once. And if they want to go on a cup run and find some success, I mean, I know it doesn't really need said because this is one of the biggest criticisms that the Leafs face every single year. All of the core have to turn up and perform at an exceptional level every game if they want to go anywhere. It's not good enough to have half the core turning up while the other half isn't really performing very well. The Leafs have all this money tied up in this small group of guys. They have to show up consistently. And next is special teams. I remember making a video after every Leafs playoff game last year. I've done it for a couple of years now, but last year in particular, every single post-game video that I did, I felt like I talked about their special teams constantly and the problems that they have with their special teams, and unfortunately that still seems to be an issue almost a full year on. Last night's matchup was no different. Marginal 1-goal deficit losses often come down to special teams, and with 11 penalty minutes each between Toronto and Florida last night, they had equal opportunity to capitalise on the power play and also shut down on the PK. The reason that Florida won last night is because they went 2 for 3 on the power play. Meanwhile, the Leafs 0 for 3. 2 power play goals for Sam Bennett won the Panthers that game, ultimately. The Panthers were also missing some key players last night, so this wasn't even a full-strength Panthers team. And to shut down a team with that kind of talent on it, your special teams have to be better. The Leafs made some crucial errors and ultimately they couldn't shut down the Panthers' power play twice over while simultaneously being unable to capitalise on their own man advantage, which is the whole reason they lost in the end. The Leafs need to perfect their special teams going into the postseason, especially their penalty kill. Their penalty kill is ranked 16th right now in the NHL. Having a middle of the table average penalty kill isn't good enough. It's not good enough for the postseason. Sometimes games like that really come down to whether you can like shut down a power play or whether you can capitalise on your own power play. Their own power play is better, but I'd still like it to be even better than that in my opinion. But in particular, neutralising other teams on the PK is something they absolutely need to be better at, and last night's game really highlighted that. And the final factor which sprung to my mind last night while I watched the Florida Leafs game was just the whole pressure. Being under pressure. It may not have been an actual playoff game, but last night was really important for not only playoff positioning, but also for momentum for this Leafs team, and it feels like they really could have done with that boost. Winning the division feels like a potential game changer for the Leafs, and last night's loss made that aspiration slip further away from their grasp. The Leafs do face Florida another couple of times actually before the end of the season, but Florida have got some easier matchups coming up which should, in theory, be easier points for them to pick up, which leaves the Leafs in real sort of damage. Last night's game could well come back to haunt them. If the season finishes and they only just missed out on the division title, I think last night's game will really, really haunt them. Everyone knows that playing in Toronto, the Toronto media, it's intense. It's a hockey city, which is why it's so fun to be a Leafs fan and why for so many players it's an honour to play for the Leafs. But I do just often think about how much this pressure gets to the team. I feel. Sometimes I wonder if they wouldn't make some of the mistakes they do if it was a lower stakes game. As I just mentioned, their special teams combined with taking some really avoidable penalties in my opinion led them to slip up. 1 or 2 of those penalties, you just can't take them and you need to watch your discipline. And when I see them slipping up like that, I do think, is it the pressure? getting to them of this game. And if you're going to take some penalties, which of course you are, you can't avoid getting penalties, of course, but there are some that are more avoidable than others. But you're ultimately going to take some penalties, and so you need to be able to shut down the power play of the opposing team. And it really felt like that was what cost them this game. I felt like overall they played well. I feel like they looked like a strong team, especially for the first 10 minutes of the game, and then again in the third period. I really thought they were going to tie it up. The Leafs really dominated for some of that third, and out of the two teams, I would say they came out firing the most as well. There was some really good plays from the Leafs. I do feel like they performed well overall, but that's the scary thing, is that it still ultimately wasn't enough. So hopefully the Leafs can capitalise on these chances and prove that they can thrive under the pressure and beat this Panthers team before the season is up. So there you have it. Those are the top 5 things that sprung to my mind watching the Leafs Florida game last night that I feel like are relevant issues going into the postseason. Leave me a comment down below. What do you think I missed out? What other common denominators do you think there were between last night's game against Florida and the Leafs in the postseason? Because I feel like there was many. I feel like it was really a game which did remind me of a playoff game. It had a similar type of vibe to it. So leave me a comment down below letting me know what you think. Once again, make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and also like this video if you did enjoy it. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back soon with more hockey chats from across the pond. Bye guys.
Do I want this too much? I know I have burned you once before.